What's a potato?
Never mind that.
She started heading towards her ship, and he followed.
You said these shields only work against those plasma guns, which is why you have the swords and axes and whatnot for physical combat, correct?
Yes.
And the Imperia will have these same shields? They haven't created something different that can also shield against physical attacks?
Yes. Mira, I don't understand why you are asking these questions.
What I don't understand is why you don't have a weapon that fires a physical round.
A kinetic gun?
Sure, I would just call it a gun. All the weapons back home fire a physical component. In a gun, we call it a bullet.
All? If we had something like that, there would be few species that would be able to handle it. If it's anything like the ship's kinetic round turrets, the recoil would break every bone in my arm and a few other bones too.
Well, on my ship, I have compressed air screws and some stiff tubing. With a few extra parts that should be on board here, I can make a variation of a potato gun from back home. I'll be able to shoot screws to act like my bullets. Then I won't have to get up close and attempt to use a sword that I have zero training with.
I agree. A sword would probably be too large for you. You are going to have this axe on you just in case, however.
Povin replied as he handed her the axe in question.
Strap it on.
His tone said that regardless as to who was in charge between them, he wasn't going to back down on this one. She sighed and attached it to where he pointed was the space on her atmosphere belt for it. Inside the human ship, the ceiling was a little too close for his comfort, but at least Povin could still stand upright. He was curious about the ship, due to it looking like such old tech to him. Mira crouched down to check the gauges on the air tanks. She was sure she had refilled the one she had been using when she had the nearly full alien abduction experience, back when she had been working on the ship with Zanatla. She was right. The gauges all still showed they were full. Mira headed to the supply closet, pulled out the cart, and loaded it with her tool bag, all of the screws available, which, while laughable for such a short trip, were still a small number for what she wanted. It would have to do. The tubing was PVC piping, so she grabbed a few lengths of it, as well as a few other odds and ends that may or may not end up being useful for construction, such as a flexible tube, washers, and thread tape. She then rolled the cart back to the oxygen tanks and started loading the 6 tanks onto the cart. Curious, Povin moved so that a tank would be subject to his own gravity and attempted to lift. It was heavy, and this little human appeared to be picking them up easily. He could do it, but it was not without quite a bit of effort. She didn't have enough room on the cart for the last one, and just hoisted it onto her shoulder and carried it with one arm wrapped around for stability and pushed the rest of the cart one-handed. Were all humans like this?
Where is a storeroom or workroom where I can put this together?
Mira asked. Povin leads her over to an appropriate room. Once there, she used her portable to contact Zanatla while she worked on her modified potato gun. She answered shortly.
Greetings and warm rocks to you, Zanatla. Do you have a few minutes to help me with something?
Greetings and warm rocks to you too, Mira.
She smiled at the thought of the warm-blooded human wishing comfort to her.
Yes, we are traveling, so my work won't start until we get there for the most part. How can I help you?
My research says that Imperian battle tactics is to get into any of the ship bays. Once breached, the ship will divert shields to maintain atmosphere, and then they will leave their ships to pillage the rest of the ship.
Zanatla frowned, but nodded.
Povin also tells me that these shields are only good against your pulse-type weapons. My research has not made note of anyone using a kinetic-style gun. This includes the Imperia?
Yes.
Good. I need to know how to play an audio file over the speakers. I want them to think humans with our kinetic guns survived and are shooting at them. Can we do that?
I don't understand.
Povin replied.
We don't have humans with kinetic weapons on board.
You're about to have one human with a kinetic weapon, just not what they are used to. They know what these sounds will mean, and it might cause them to hesitate long enough for someone to take them out.
We'll need permission first. I'm sending over the request to the Meteor with an explanation.
Zanatla replied. In the meantime, Mira sent over the audio file. Zanatla cleaned it up so that it sounded more like how it should, and even manipulated it so that it could sound at times like multiple people were firing from different areas. After a few minutes, she reported that they were given a blanket permission from Rear Admiral Vebby to do any crazy idea that human has that Zanatla also feels is worth the time or resources to implement.
Sounds like a yes to me.
Mira smiled.
Good. I have a few more ideas.
What do you have in mind?
Zanatla asked.
These atmosphere belts.
She tapped her belt.
Can they be hacked?
Hacked? Broken? Yes, they can be broken.
Sorry, slang. Infected? I think that's what you would call it. Can they be infected?
Mira asked.
Well, yes. That's why they had to be destroyed.
Zanatla was confused as to what was being asked.
Perhaps hijacked would be a better descriptor? I want to know if we could set a trap so that once it is crossed, anyone with an air combination requirement such as the Asili, the Imperia, and myself require, would be forced into the Atsili gravity needs.
Zanatla's eyes got wide as she understood what Mira was asking, and a smile slowly formed.
I don't understand.
Povin replied.
You want to crush them within their spheres?
It wouldn't crush them. It would make it a lot harder to move for the Imperia, slightly easier for me to move. And conversely, the Imperia would tire quicker without understanding why.
She turned to face Zanatla again.
Is this something that is allowed in combat? And if so, something that is possible? The Drala and Flexusri have different air needs, so it wouldn't affect them.
As to if it can be done, I believe it can. We would need something to cause the activation, but let me check with Rear Admiral Vebby to ensure we are not crossing any lines he does not wish to cross.
She tapped away at another monitor. Mira continued to work on her modified potato gun. It wasn't long before they received the okay to continue. Zanatla and Mira worked out the physical components and sent the plans to a material printer to create.
This is pretty neat,
Mira said of the printer.
We have something similar back on Earth. We call it a 3D printer, but it doesn't work nearly this quickly. Something like this would have taken over a day to make, and it wouldn't have been able to make all the interior components, just the casing.
Ah, yes. I recall hearing that our materials printers had minimal capabilities too some time ago.
Zanatla replied.
Let me know when they start finishing, and I'll show you how to hook them up to your portable so that I can upload the instructions to our very own infection devices.
Mira finished tweaking her gun.
Where can I do a test shot?
She asked Povin. He looked over to Zanatla.
Just call me back when you're ready. Printing should be finished in 30 minutes. Unless you had any other ideas, Mira.
Do you think the material printer could make a net gun if I drew up some quick plans of what I need to create the item?
Is everything on Earth a gun?
Povin asked.
Kind of.
He rolled his eyes. Zanatla replied in the affirmative, and Mira let her know she would send over some drawings after the test fire. They headed to the Flex Usri pool.
This is the only place I can think of that can take a kinetic round. You won't pollute the water with this gun of yours, would you?
No, I'm only shooting out air in the actual screw. If we can reclaim the screw, we won't leave anything behind. Do you think we can borrow Seaman Deno?
I'll send the request.
Povin replied as he tapped his portable to send the request. In a few minutes, Deno walked through the doors to the pool.
You were in luck that I was so close. How can I help?
I need to test fire this kinetic shot. It won't cause any damage to the pool, but we would like to retrieve the screw I'm using so as to not litter your pool.
On it!
They poised themselves in a ready position and waited for the shot to be made. Mira loaded the barrel, opened the valve, and shot into the water. Deno then dove in and retrieved the screw.
That was amazing.
They exclaimed as they swam back to the edge of the pool and exited. Deno handed over the screw. Mira was satisfied with the sight. It wasn't great, but as long as she was aiming for center mass, it would kill. The pressure was good as well. She had shot off some air in the workroom, so had an idea of how much was used each time.
Let's go refill this tank, and then I need to send over some rough plans to Zanatla.
While the air canister refilled, Mira did some quick sketches of what she was looking for. She also sent over designs for something similar to a harpoon gun. With 6 oxygen tanks, she could make a total of 6 items. The potato gun was one, and Zanatla would be deciding which to make for the other 5 items. Other than Mira, only the Asili would be able to safely use the weapons. While the kickback was not great, she also didn't want to risk a Drala or Flixusri getting injured. If they had more time, they could have scanned the oxygen tanks and printed off more of them to make more kinetic guns. Zanatla settled on the harpoon design. Based on ship supplies, they would only need to create the bolts, which would actually be shaped a bit more like a mini crossbow bolt. And then Mira kicked herself for not thinking of mini crossbows. Unfortunately, they were running out of time. With the infection boxes made, Mira hooked them up to her portable for Zanatla to program them. They tested it with Mira's belt and checked the readings. Once the boxes were ready, Fennis sent a few of his men to pick them up and set them up in the places Zanatla had marked on their ship's plans. The mini harpoon bolts were in the process of being made, while Mira made a video recording for Fennis that he would be able to forward to the best Asili candidates to use the weapons. The recording was a brief tutorial and where to come pick up the weapons. She then made another video that would be sent to everyone on board about the infection boxes, where they were located, so that if they got into trouble and were being chased, they could run past them to give themselves an edge against the Imperia. Everything was now set up for the upcoming battle. Pilots were ready to deploy, infection devices were live, and teams were set up to meet with any incoming landing parties. The Asili shooters had been excited for a new weapon, and there was an eagerness to take out their pounds of flesh on the monsters of the galaxy. Captain Sisveta has updated their ETA to 1 hour after expected intersection with the Imperia ships. The battle carrier was flying with all haste, but was still going to be the last to arrive by at least an hour, if not 2. The crew of the Meteor was now at the worst part of battle, the wait. Povin started to pace, but Mira made him sit down.
You are going to wear yourself out before the fight even starts. Sit and talk to me about anything. Family, friends, stories from childhood, favorite memories, things you want to do when your time in the service is finished. Anything. Just talk and while away the time with me.
He let out a big sigh and then sat down. There were 3 others in their group, and as Povin spoke, the other added in their own stories or hopes for the future. As a result, the team began to relax. On one of the large screens, Mira put up the camera feeds so that they could stay abreast of the situation. The fighting was fierce. The pilots of the Meteor were outnumbered but talented. They knew they only needed to keep the Imperian fighters busy. Even so, it wasn't long before holes were being opened up into the landing bays and enemy ships were landing. The traps had been set so that they would affect the atmosphere belts quickly. If the Imperian invaders realized there was a gravity difference, they didn't seem bothered by it just yet. The ground teams were set up at natural bottlenecks within the ship just outside of the ship bays. Zanatla was in charge of sending the gunshot sounds through the speakers. She waited until Imperia were leaving the protection of their craft before sending the sounds. Mira chuckled as they ducked back behind cover. She had her shot lined up and was just waiting for one of them to get bold enough to move forward. Her range was not going to be long due to the nature of her gun, so had to wait. Plasma shots were being fired around her from her team, which were being returned by the Imperia invaders. Finally. One of the invaders got bold, thinking the kinetic shots were fake, and charged towards Mira's team. She squeezed her release trigger, and a f-boomf could be heard as the compressed air sent the screw flying through the air. The alien shuddered to a stop and put a hand to its chest before falling forward as its purple blood began flowing into a pool. There was startled noises and a scrambling back as Mira reloaded her gun, waiting for the next bold alien. Sometimes they would attack in groups, so Mira would take out one while the other 4 members would concentrate on a different Imperia, and she would then take out someone else. They continued like this as the room slowly cleared. The bay was filled with ships, so no one else could land. They would worry about clearing them out later. For now, this bay was secure, so Pavan checked in with other pods to see who needed help.
Hey everyone, hope you loved the video. Don't forget to give it a thumbs up and hit subscribe for more awesome sci-fi content. And if you're feeling generous, check out our Ko-Fi page to support the channel. Every bit helps us bring you more stories from the stars. Thanks a bunch.